Some NBA beefs are legendary. Shaq versus Kobe, explosive. LeBron versus the Celtics, personal. Draymond versus, well, everyone, chaotic. And of course, Michael Jordan versus Isiah Thomas, loud, bitter, and decades later, still unresolved. But this wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was awkward. On one side, you had David Robinson, the Admiral, a 7-foot naval officer, humble, disciplined, a devout Christian, the kind of superstar who led by quiet example. And on the other side, Dennis Rodman, the Worm, the NBA's wild card. Tattoos, piercings, neon hair, the best rebounder of his generation and the loudest personality in the league. On paper, this should have been unstoppable. Rodman's defensive genius and relentless hustle seemed like the perfect complement to Robinson's all-around brilliance. Together, it looked like the makings of a generational defensive juggernaut, the kind of foundation that could echo the dominance of the 1960s Celtics and maybe even spark a dynasty. But in reality, they barely spoke. And in the middle of a championship window, this strange, silent feud didn't just derail the Spurs. To understand this beef, we need to go back to the mid-90s. The Spurs had one of the best players in the world, a championship window wide open, and they thought Dennis Rodman was the missing piece. But before we dive in, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss the next story. Because this one, it starts with a team built for a title and ends with the NBA's most awkward beef.
That was not a problem with Dennis Rodman in San Antonio. I did my job.
The Spurs weren't just good, they were legitimate contenders. David Robinson, drafted first overall in 1987, but debuting 2 years later due to his Navy service, quickly became one of the league's most dominant forces. In the early 90s, he won MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and a scoring title, all while redefining what a 7-foot center could be. Robinson could run the floor like a guard, hit the mid-range jumper, lead a fast break, and anchor a defense with his length and quickness. He was a unicorn before we even had a word for it. But San Antonio was missing something. As dominant as Robinson was, the Spurs needed toughness, grit, somebody to do the dirty work. Enter Dennis Rodman. Fresh off back-to-back titles with the Bad Boy Pistons, Rodman had cemented himself as the league's most versatile defender and the best rebounder on earth. He was one of the main cogs of Detroit's late 80s dominance, reaching 3 straight finals, winning 2 championships, and capturing back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards. But after the Bulls swept them in '91, and as Detroit's core aged and injuries piled up, the Pistons made a bold move, trading Rodman to the Spurs for Sean Elliott. In his first season with San Antonio, he led the team with 17 rebounds per game, nearly 7 more boards than David Robinson. On paper, it was a perfect fit. Robinson was the polished superstar, while Rodman brought relentless energy, doing the dirty work and locking up the opponent's best player. Together, they turned the Spurs into the league's top defense. But here's the problem. What looked like the start of a dynasty was actually the makings of the NBA's most awkward feud.
The problem wasn't on the court. Statistically, Robinson and Rodman were dominant together, but off the court, they couldn't have been more different. David Robinson was the Admiral, a Naval Academy graduate who sacrificed the first 2 years of his career to serve the nation. Soft-spoken, a devout Christian who led by example, disciplined, humble, and polite, the kind of guy you'd want representing your franchise. Dennis Rodman was none of those things. He thrived on chaos, tattoos, piercings, neon hair, late nights. He pushed boundaries everywhere, from how he dressed to how he played to how he lived. This is the same guy who dated Madonna in San Antonio and broke it off because he didn't want to be seen as her boy toy. In Chicago, he married Carmen Electra, divorced her 9 days later, reconciled, and then divorced her again in 1999. To put it bluntly, Dennis Rodman was pure chaos. As Carmen Electra put it,
He'd like to go out. He'd like to go to clubs. We'd go to his favorite restaurant, then we'd go to a nightclub, then we'd go to after hours. It didn't stop. It was definitely an occupational hazard to be Dennis's girlfriend.
And when you put those two extremes in the same locker room, it wasn't fireworks, it was silence. Reports say they barely spoke. According to teammate Jack Haley, Rodman simply didn't respect Robinson. He felt Robinson lacked intensity and a strong work ethic, sitting out practices with tendinitis or soreness, while Rodman prided himself on grinding through them. That disconnect caused constant friction. Robinson, on the other hand, tried everything to bridge the gap. Haley recalled Robinson inviting Rodman to lunch, trying to talk basketball, even reaching out on a religious level in hopes of turning his life around. But Rodman never responded. This wasn't Shaq and Kobe throwing jabs through the media.
This wasn't the decades-long Jordan-Isiah feud with no end in sight.
This was something much stranger. Two Hall of Famers sharing the same uniform and acting like strangers. And eventually that silence started to echo where it mattered most, in the playoffs.
At first, the Spurs looked like a juggernaut.
In Rodman's first season, San Antonio won 55 games, finished fourth in the West, and ranked among the league's elite with a top 10 defense and a top 3 net rating. Their defense was suffocating, their rebounding unmatched, and David Robinson was at his peak, leading the league in scoring at 29.8 points per game and finishing second in MVP voting behind Hakeem Olajuwon. But when the playoffs came around, the cracks started to show. In 1994, the Spurs faced the Utah Jazz in the first round. Karl Malone and John Stockton were playoff veterans, masters of the pick and roll, one of the most unstoppable plays in basketball. On paper, with Robinson playing at an MVP level and the Spurs holding home court advantage, San Antonio looked like the better team. From the start, it was a physical battle. The Spurs dominated Game 1, blowing out the Jazz 106-89. But the series quickly turned. Utah responded by winning the next 4 games, capped by a 95-90 victory in Game 4. Tensions boiled over in Game 2 when Rodman kneed John Stockton. Karl Malone mocked him, saying, "He's got to hit me harder than that. My daughter hits harder than that." Rodman, furious, taunted the Jazz bench and was ejected. It was a microcosm of the Spurs' tenure. He was often the only one fighting when things got physical. Jazz coach Jerry Sloan went as far as accusing Rodman of trying to take out John Stockton. "I think Rodman intentionally wanted to take John out," Sloan said. He pretty much admitted as much when he came off the floor. I can't quote him verbatim, but that was the gist of it. In Game 1, Stockton even took down Robinson in a scuffle.
The lead is 24 points. Boy, I tell you what, we're going nuts down there. Stockton.
And Robinson barely reacted. Despite the clashes, Rodman actually respected Stockton. Stockton's as mean as they come. Everybody might think he's a choir boy, but he'll slip you an elbow when the refs aren't looking. Or he'll talk some junk. I like that in a guy, Rodman admitted. Meanwhile, Rodman's off-court reputation, the tattoos, piercings, and erratic behavior only fueled his image as the NBA's ultimate rebel. On the floor, Robinson faltered, averaging nearly 9 points below his season average and struggling badly from the field. The Spurs collapsed, losing 4-1 in a stunning first-round exit for a 55-win team. Rodman, he was erratic, mixing elite defense and rebounding with technicals, outbursts, and clashes with the coaching staff. Instead of stabilizing the Spurs, he amplified the chaos.
Coach John Lucas tried to defend Rodman.
Whatever happens to Dennis, he's immediately blamed for it. Stockton says something, Dennis responds, and he's the one who gets the technical and gets thrown out. Their bench didn't get anything. But regardless of that, give them credit. They just beat us today. The following season, after a disappointing playoff exit, the Spurs replaced John Lucas with Bob Hill. They reacquired Sean Elliott after a year in Detroit, brought back Avery Johnson from Golden State, and added veterans like Doc Rivers and Moses Malone to strengthen their bench and locker room. But trouble came early. Rodman started the year on an excused leave that turned into an indefinite suspension, and the Spurs stumbled to a 7-9 start. Once he returned, though, everything changed. San Antonio won 13 of their next 14 games, surged to 30-15 by the All-Star break, and went 40-9 with Rodman in the lineup. They later ripped off a 15-game winning streak and finished with the NBA's best record at 62-20. David Robinson delivered another dominant season, winning MVP with averages of
27.6 points, 10.8 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 1.7 steals, and 3.2 blocks.
showcasing his all-around brilliance. Both Robinson and Rodman even cracked the top 6 in Defensive Player of the Year voting, a rare feat for teammates. With a top 5 ranking in both offensive and defensive rating, San Antonio looked like the favorite in the West. The Spurs opened the 1995 playoffs with a dominant sweep of the young Denver Nuggets, led by Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Dikembe Mutombo, and rookie Jalen Rose. In the second round, they beat the Los Angeles Lakers in 6 games despite a breakout performance from Nick Van Exel. Robinson was dominant, averaging 30 points, 15 rebounds, and 3 blocks per game. But even during that series, trouble was brewing. Rodman was suspended for insubordination after sitting down on the floor during a timeout. That set up a matchup with the defending champion Houston Rockets, a 6th seed that had won only 47 games and barely survived 2 grueling series that went the distance, including a 3-1 comeback against the Phoenix Suns in the second round. On paper, San Antonio had every advantage. They were rested, they had home court, and they had the newly crowned MVP in David Robinson, who received his trophy before Game 1 in front of the home crowd at the Alamodome. But history had other plans. Hakeem Olajuwon, who had finished just 5th in MVP voting, took exception. What followed was one of the most lopsided superstar duels the league had ever seen.
Houston stunned San Antonio by taking the first 2 games on the Spurs' home court.
And he should be able to touch the ball. Sean Elliott going. Clyde tries to dress it up, and Houston has won this ball.
Houston has come in here and won another clutch game on the road. They are the dream team of the playoffs of 1995.
The Spurs responded by winning the next 2 in Houston, setting up a pivotal Game 5 at the Alamodome with momentum on their side. You'd think San Antonio would come out with urgency, but instead, they came out flat, outscored 32-18 in the first quarter, and blown out 111-90. Meanwhile, Rodman kept clashing with the Spurs coaching staff. Before Game 4, he showed up late, which led to reduced playing time and only added to the team's sluggish start in Game 5.
Rodman will not be starting for the San Antonio Spurs tonight as part of a disciplinary measure imposed by Coach Bob Hill. Rodman was 35 minutes late for practice yesterday, didn't even call the team, and when he arrived said he was late because he had a stuffy head. Well, Coach Hill told me that Rodman is fine, at least physically, and that he informed Rodman after practice yesterday that he would not be starting. He said Rodman knows the drill. The same thing happened in Miami earlier this season. J.R. Reed will start for Rodman. Rodman will play in the game. How much will be dictated by the pace of the game.
That night, Olajuwon humiliated Robinson, dropping 42 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, and 5 blocks on the league MVP. Robinson's stat line of 22 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks looked solid on paper, but his 7 turnovers and defeated body language told the real story. To Rodman, Robinson's lack of fight was infuriating. Houston closed the series in Game 6, with Olajuwon posting 39 points, 17 rebounds, 2 steals, and 5 blocks. Robinson shrank again in the spotlight, finishing with just 19 points on 6 of 17 shooting and 6 turnovers. It became one of the most lopsided superstar duels ever. Olajuwon dismantled Robinson, averaging 35 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 blocks per game, making the league MVP look helpless. Rodman, meanwhile, looked completely disengaged. Cameras even caught him lying down on the court and taking off his shoes mid-game, as if the moment meant nothing. Robinson shouldered the blame for the loss, but behind the scenes, Rodman was fuming. To him, the series only confirmed what he already believed. David Robinson was too soft to win at the highest level.
By the summer of 1995, the Spurs had seen enough. Rodman's antics weren't just headlines anymore. They were distractions the team couldn't escape. He skipped practices, showed up late to games, and clashed openly with coaches. At one point,
he flat out disrespected head coach Bob Hill, tuning him out in huddles and even walking away mid-timeout. Then came the theatrics, like when he injured his shoulder in a motorcycle accident. While the Spurs were chasing a championship, their defensive anchor was sidelined because he wiped out on a bike. His high-profile relationship with Madonna only added to the circus, the full Dennis Rodman experience the Spurs never signed up for. On the court, Rodman was still elite. He averaged 17.3 and 16.8 rebounds per game in his 2 seasons with San Antonio, capturing his 3rd and 4th consecutive rebounding titles. He helped the Spurs reach the playoffs both years, and statistically, he did everything they brought him in to do. But behind the scenes, it was a different story. Rodman's relationship with the front office, especially a rising executive named Gregg Popovich, was fractured beyond repair. Popovich valued discipline, structure, and professionalism. Rodman represented the opposite. And with every fine, every suspension, every outburst, it became clearer this marriage was doomed. Rodman later recalled, quote, "That's when Gregg Popovich was the GM. He didn't like me at all. I wasn't the church-going guy, and David Robinson called me the devil. I said, okay, man, whatever. You didn't pay me to be nice. You paid me to win. I love David. He's a good guy. But Popovich wanted me gone so bad, he traded me to Chicago for Will Perdue straight up."
David Robinson never took public shots at Rodman, but his silence said everything. The Admiral embodied structure. Rodman lived to break it. And the Spurs locker room was caught in the middle. Robinson tried to connect with Rodman, but his efforts went nowhere. "Dennis is a complicated guy," Robinson said on the Bulls Talk podcast. "Because of his background, he doesn't always know how to express himself. He's hard to figure out. He might come into the locker room and not speak for months. Then, out of nowhere, he'd say something and you'd think, okay, maybe don't say anything else. It just came out of left field." Robinson recalled asking Rodman to take on more of a leadership role for a young Spurs team, but Rodman had no interest. He's an easy guy to like because he has a good heart. He wants to play hard, he wants to do the right things. But man, as far as a team goes, he was so destructive. He'd show up to practice late, and there was nothing you could do to get him out of his comfort zone. The final straw came after back-to-back playoff disappointments. San Antonio wasn't just losing, they were unraveling. The front office had to make a choice.
Keep the best rebounder in basketball or restore order to the franchise? The decision was swift. That offseason, the Spurs shipped Rodman to the Chicago Bulls for Will Perdue, a backup center with little impact. On paper, it was one of the most lopsided trades in NBA history. But for San Antonio, it wasn't about value. It was about removing Rodman, no matter the cost. And in the end, both sides got exactly what they wanted. Once the trade went through, both players' careers went in drastically different directions. For Dennis Rodman, the timing couldn't have been better. He landed in Chicago alongside Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen just as the Bulls were gearing up for another title run after their painful loss to Orlando. Unlike San Antonio, Chicago had the ultimate competitor in Jordan, whose fire pushed teammates to the brink, and Rodman thrived in that environment. The Bulls also had Phil Jackson, the Zen master, who didn't try to change Rodman but instead embraced his flaws, giving him space as long as he delivered on the court. And deliver he did. His rebounding, defense, and sheer tenacity made the Bulls nearly unbeatable. In 3 seasons, Rodman helped Chicago capture 3 straight championships, including the iconic 72-win campaign capped with a title over the Seattle Supersonics. David Robinson, meanwhile, faced a very different road. After Rodman's departure, injuries began to pile up. Back issues, a broken foot, and other setbacks kept him off the floor for long stretches. The Spurs, once perennial contenders, suddenly collapsed, winning just 20 games in the 1996-97 season. But that collapse became a blessing in disguise. With the number 1 pick in the 1997 draft, San Antonio selected Tim Duncan, another generational big man. Together, Robinson and Duncan formed the Twin Towers, laying the foundation for one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history. Robinson would go on to win 2 championships, not as the go-to franchise star, but as a veteran leader who embraced his role perfectly. Exactly what Gregg Popovich envisioned. In the end, both sides got what they wanted. Rodman found rings and chaos in Chicago. Robinson found Duncan, stability, and multiple championships. And it all traces back to one of the NBA's most awkward beefs.
Dennis Rodman never held back when it came to David Robinson. He called him soft, said he lacked the killer instinct, that he didn't have the edge to carry a team to a championship. And looking back, he wasn't the only one who thought that. In the 1995 Western Conference Finals, Robinson was exposed. Hakeem Olajuwon didn't just beat him, he destroyed him, averaging 35 a game and shutting him down on the other end. Olajuwon made the league's best big man look helpless. To Rodman, that series was proof that Robinson wasn't cut from the same cloth as Jordan or Bird, guys who would die before letting an opponent embarrass them like that. But here's the flip side. Robinson wasn't wired like Rodman, Jordan, or Kobe. He wasn't a trash talker, a bully, or a cold-blooded killer. He was disciplined, humble, and steady. And that consistency eventually paid off. With Tim Duncan by his side, Robinson won 2 championships and cemented his place among the all-time great centers. In a way, yes. Robinson wasn't a killer. He lacked that ruthless edge as a number 1 option, even with a talented Spurs roster in '95. On the biggest stage, with the lights brightest and the season on the line, Robinson disappeared. No fight, no scowl. He simply vanished. But that didn't stop him from becoming a champion. And ironically, the very qualities Rodman mocked, his humility, quiet leadership, and faith, became the foundation of the Spurs dynasty. What do you think? Was Rodman right about Robinson? Or did Robinson prove him wrong?
Most NBA beefs are loud. They come with sound bites, trash talk, and highlight reels of players going at each other. But this one, it was different. There were no punches thrown, no public meltdowns, no dramatic face-offs, just 2 Hall of Fame teammates who couldn't connect. In the end, both were vindicated. Rodman left San Antonio and immediately won 3 championships with the Bulls. His chaos, which the Spurs rejected, became a weapon in Chicago. Robinson endured injuries, but his patience was rewarded. With Tim Duncan, he built a dynasty rooted in discipline and stability. It was awkward, it was quiet, but it mattered. Because the truth is, the Spurs dynasty and the Bulls' second three-peat both trace back to this strange feud. A superstar who thrived in chaos, and another who only won once he found peace. The NBA's most awkward beef didn't just change 2 careers, it changed the league forever.